today we're going to try to determine what solutions we can arrive at and what differences we'll still have. But first, introduce ladies first. Debbie Riddle, State Representative, fresh from appearances on every major news channel, Fox News, CNN, and even CNBC. Let's give Debbie Riddle a hand. State Representative. And how do I introduce Norman Adams to the Heights family? Okay, except to say that I know for sure that Norman Adams has testified at the federal Congress, at the state legislature, at the Republican Party. Daniel has nothing in alliance then on Norman Adams on the immigration issue. Let's give Norman a big hand. And with that, also, Karen, write questions. Please write your questions down and bring them up to your moderator. The first question was, why is Norman so short? But we're not going to answer that. All right. And but serious, write your questions down to bring it up. We'll do ladies first, right, Norman? That's the opening statement. And let's pay close attention to our two debaters today at the debate of the century in immigration. Will not make it the decade. Debbie Riddle. Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you so much for having us here today. This is an amazing day, and the fact that you have the courage to pull together this kind of a crowd shows one thing: this chamber rocks.
All right.
You rock. It also shows that you have got backbone. And you're not afraid of political correctness, or may I say political incorrectness. Because this is a topic that is a little daunting for most people. But it's an honor for me to be up here on the stage with my friends. Norman is a friend of mine, and we've been in the trenches together. I want to tell you a true story real quick. I know my time's limited. Norman, Dr. Hotze, and I were walking down the hall of the state capitol because we were in the trenches together working against and fighting the margins tax, weren't we, Norman?
Yes, absolutely.
And who comes walking towards us but my wonderful governor, Governor Perry. Now, I love him. I think he's a fabulous governor. I think he'll make a great president. But he was against us on this issue. And Norman, Dr. Hotze, and I stood there, and we got yelled at.
Yep.
We got yelled at. And so there's something special when you're in the foxhole, when you're in the trenches fighting together, that creates a bond. But like any other family or any other group, you don't agree 100% of the time. And that's okay. And it's healthy to have this conversation. My husband, Mike Riddle, we've been married 41 years. Here he is, Mike Riddle, right out here. We've been married 41 years. I got to tell you, thank you. He stuck with me 41 years. And we don't agree 100% of the time. We don't. Sometimes Mike's wrong.
Okay, Debbie, 3 minutes. Let's go.
3 minutes. But today, I got to tell you, I feel at home. I'm the graduate of Waltrip. I was reared out here in Oak Forest. My uncle Dalton Billings had Billings Jewelers on North Shepherd. My daddy was a mason over at Holland Lodge. Gail Galligan, my district director, she graduated from Waltrip. And Reagan. So I feel very much at home here. I miss Kaplan's been her, but today is going to be great because we have got to tackle the tough issues for the safety and security of the people of Texas, which is the #1 priority of government. As an elected official, that is my #1 priority, to make sure that the safety and security of the people of Texas is well established, and this topic has everything to do with that #1 issue. Thank you again.
Back 2 minutes of her time when I keep track, but they are Ellen Cohen, newly elected to the Houston City Council, and Mike Sullivan in his 5th year at Houston City Council. They're the timekeepers. I think Mike, you're bringing the Ellen is the technology savvy one. She's running, Facebook. All right, let's go. Norman now.
All right, well, thank you. First of all, it's hard for me to believe that you folks would pay money come over here and listen to an insurance man. So I'm pretty sure that Representative Little and the tax man were the primary draw, but I do appreciate you being here. I do want to recognize that this latest session, and I've been testifying in Austin, as Paul mentioned, and most of the time with Paul, at least 30 years or so. I've been testifying on pro-life issues, tort reform issues, tax issues, business tax, for example, for as long as I can remember. But I spent more time in this latest legislature testifying and got a better look at what these elected folks, these elected officials are up against and what they do for us, that I guarantee you, unless you've been there, you cannot have a full appreciation. You know, we're monitoring weekly when all these different bills are gonna come up, and Darlene's kind of running the war room for me on that, and I never know what day I've gotta go, but I know I've gotta be in Austin at 1:30 because the session is scheduled to end at 1 and the hearing meeting starts 30 minutes thereafter. The problem is, no one except God knows when the session is going to end. And so you will sometimes sit there, and of course they'll remain in session, and you'll wait 10 to 15 hours before the hearing they all have to attend begins. And so for 6 months of their life, our state reps and our senators, I'm telling you folks, they've worked themselves, they lose their normal life, and they really work hard. I came away from this session with a greater appreciation for both Democrats and Republicans than I've ever had before. Now, Paul took away part of my win. 17 years as program director for this chamber, I never once introduced my first wife to you. I want Debbie Sue Cheryl Adams to stand up one more time. This is my first wife. 47 years this year. We're working on more, but what she said was very important.
Sorry, Debbie Sue, I blew it.
Is the mic not working? Is it better? Is that better? Okay. Sorry, Deb. So, this is an emotional issue. We're talking about immigration. And I like to borrow somewhat on my, let me put it in the holder. I like to borrow somewhat on Charles Foster's story that I've heard him tell so many times about the fact that when most of our ancestors came here, they came over from Europe, and if they came over first class, suitcase straight to your hotel room. This is prior to 1923. Your ancestors came over here, here's how it happened. If they came over steerage with the rest of the poor folks down in the hold, they had to walk past a examiner who looked at them to see if they looked sick. If they looked sick, straight to the quarantine station. Now, there were no quotas of any kind. But it was, even then, this was an emotional issue. Go today to New York, you got little Italy, little France, little Germany. It was an emotional issue, newcomers. How many of you recall seeing a sign in a pub, no Irishmen or dogs allowed in here? Okay? I'll tell you, if your ancestors were German Lutheran like mine, depending on what part of the country you came from, whether or not you would live in Lee County or what have you, if it was up to them, we'd be speaking German today. But, you know, I still, in fact, Paul, you're probably not this old. I still remember when a Polak Czech wedding was an interracial marriage. Okay? And so it is an emotional deal. And what I find...
It still isn't spring break time.
It is, immigration is an emotional issue. But the biggest problem we got with our mess today is we're not willing to talk about it. Politicians are scared to death to talk about it. The minute or the second that Senator Hutchison or Senator Cornyn says, I'm willing to discuss immigration, they get covered up. They get covered up with faxes saying, you must be for open borders and amnesty. I mean, I'm willing to talk about it. Well, you must be for amnesty. That's the ring. And so, you know, so what are we here to talk about? This latest session, we were barraged, Texas was barraged, with 108 what I call enforcement only or Arizona-style bills. And incidentally, what happened to the 5-minute open statement?
You just ended up on it.
Okay.
Okay. We're going to go to some questions from the moderator.
Where's blow that hole?
What's that? Don't aim it at me, Mike. Aim it at- All right, if you've got your questions, bring them on up, and we'll start the questioning right now. Debbie?
2 minutes or 1 minute?
What's that?
1 or 2 minutes.
These are 2 minutes with 1 minute rebuttal.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Debbie, clearly this last legislative session, I believe you authored some immigration bills yourself. Were they patterned after SB 1070 in Arizona? Why don't you tell us what bills you offered and what happened in the legislative session?
One of the bills that and let me tell you, this last legislative session, every session is quite different. And this legislative session was, quite frankly, the convergence of a perfect storm. We had a budget shortfall. We had redistricting. We had school finance. Any one of those three could have blown up the whole session. But this issue regarding our border security and regarding illegal immigration was critical. And I felt like that it was important that we continue to have our voice heard with that. Yes, I did introduce something. It was not the Arizona type bill. It was something similar to that. Because we have got to give our law enforcement the ability to do what is necessary. We already have the 287G program, which works here in Harris County. But I believe that Harris County is the only county that uses that. Here in Harris County, 1,000 people a month, 1,000 illegal aliens a month are arrested through the 287G program. Quan L.X. is not a gentleman that I would often quote, but there was a little girl that was murdered. And this is what what he said. This man should not have been allowed to sneak into the country over and over again and snuff out the life of a little girl. You see, this isn't about politics. This is about the safety and security of our children and the people of Texas. The father of the little girl said, I would like to see what they're doing in Arizona done here. This is from the father of that child. And I've got to tell you, with Houston being the command and control center for the Mexican drug cartels and for the danger that we truly have here, we cannot be afraid to discuss this issue. It's critical, and I truly applaud Norman Adams for having the backbone to stand up and let's have this conversation. Thank you.
Norman, rebuttal.
Okay. Well, is this on? Y'all hear me? Okay. Debbie, first of all, I agree with you 10,000% that we ought to be tough on crime. We ought to be tough on criminals, and they don't deserve to be here. They either need to be deported if we can keep them out or locked up permanently. But the fact is that the 5 bills that you did sponsor, and I know that you meant well, and I know that the intentions were all good, as were those other 103 sponsors. But at any rate, those bills put what is the responsibility of the federal government onto the shoulders of local law enforcement. I think we Republicans call that an unfunded mandate. Those bills even put the responsibility of enforcing federal law on our school districts. And worst of all, those bills told businessmen and women, if you violate it, you're not going to just lose your business license, you're going to jail.
Okay, the moderator has a prerogative to suspend the question and answer a little bit and have a conversation. Let's have a conversation real fast between the two. Right now, is there anybody between either you or anyone in the audience that thinks the federal government is doing their job and controlling the border? Debbie?
Absolutely not. The federal government has fallen down on its job. They've ignored the job, and they've been too involved in being politically correct. But let me go back to what you mentioned regarding my bill.
Okay, I'm just doing a conversation on the border right now, the federal government. You see there's nothing, no fact or supposition fact, the federal government is doing the job they need to control the border, yes or no?
No.
Okay. Norman?
Well, actually, Paul, the federal government is doing more to control the border than they have ever done. I'm not going to say that it is adequate, but the problem is not controlling the border.
The problem is we don't know who is here and who could blow this country up any morning that you get up, because we have not identified even our own citizens, much less the non-citizens.
Okay, so in a conversation format.
Okay, I'm trying to be more conversational.
Right. I promised Larry White that you would actually live to Sunday morning for services, okay? We're looking at the border, okay? And I think the average person thinks that the border is relatively uncontrolled. We don't have any type of photo IDs. We're in a situation that we certainly don't have a national citizenship list. I know as a former voter registrar, we don't have one. So Norman, is there agreement here between you, Debbie, on what we could do on border security first?
Well, I think we're doing what we need to do on border security, and I agree with Governor Perry. It's impossible to build a continuous fence if you've seen some of the 3,000-foot sheer bluff walls along our border. I think we're doing what we need to do. We need to continue to do a good job, but you mentioned ID. That's the problem, Paul. We have not identified every non-citizen in this country. That's what we've got to do.
Amen, amen, and I totally agree with that we have got to know who is here and who is here with the intent to harm. Back to my House Bill 1202, though, Norm, that you alluded to, and saying that if you didn't comply, you would wind up in jail. I am a business owner, and what we did in this bill was we made it a very low bar to cross over for employers to check to see if the folks were legal through the E-Verify. That's not that difficult to do. It's a low bar to cross. But if employers hired someone without checking their legal status, then yes, there would be a punishment. It was a low bar to get over that everyone should be able to do, but if you didn't do it, it was a high bar after that. And until we have some kind of control over putting a jar of candy in the middle of the living room and saying, oh no, you can't have this, then they're going to continue coming, and it's going to do continual damage to our country.
Okay,
but
I got to go back on the clock, so thanks for that. All right, let's go back on the clock. Question for Norman. Okay, Norman, do you favor amnesty or a guest worker program or both?
I don't favor amnesty. I definitely favor a guest worker program, and my guest worker program would be available only to those who pass a background check and have no violent criminal background and pay an appropriate fine. And by that I mean, were they brought here as children, not of their own accord? Did they walk in here on themselves? Did they overstay a visa? There are a lot of different levels. Half the doctors in our medical center have overstayed their visa, folks, because we've sat on our rears with this situation. And so I want penalty taxes on the non-citizen worker, and I want the employer to match it. I want an incentive to hire citizens first, but you got to start with that positive ID, Paul. No amnesty.
I'm opposed to amnesty except in a situation. There are situations, look, I believe that we have to have a rule of law. But there are people that are over here, grandmothers, maybe the age of my mother, that came over here 88 years old and had their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, and everyone in the family is legal except grandma. We've got to have a little bit of common sense with this. But the fact of the matter is, once the border is secure, then these other conversations will have more validity. Because quite frankly, I do not believe that the American public is going to take anything we have to say seriously regarding this until we secure the border. Once the border is secure, then these other solutions, I think, will either be self-correcting or the conversation can go a little more smoothly.
Okay, Debbie, thanks. Now, and Debbie, let's take this a little bit further. We think there's probably 8 million false identification numbers in the IRS system. So the federal government obviously hasn't done what they need to do on the border security side, but we now have millions and millions of workers that are basically working under assumed names. How do you think we should correct that problem? And there's several charged words that we need to use in this debate and just talk about them frankly. One of them is deportation. Are you in favor of that? And what do we do about the 8 million people that are having undocumented, or should they say they actually have false identification numbers in the IRS right now?
Well, I think that that is clearly a problem, and that is basically identity theft. If they are using someone else's number, someone else's name, there are laws regarding identity theft. And once again, when we secure the border, then these other things will almost be self-correcting. But there's absolutely no excuse for identity theft. If you or I go and take someone else's social security number, if we go and take their identity, that is called identity theft, and we suffer the consequences for that.
Norman?
Well, Debbie, you keep mentioning securing the border and then we'll do something. And that is exactly the problem with this debate, because it ignores the 8 to 10 or 15 or 20 million, how many it is that are here. If we have no pathway to legalization, if their only option is deportation, then whether you want to say you support it or not, you're supporting mass deportation. We cannot have a solution if we do not have some pathway to legalization. That is the key to this debate.
But Norman, in his conversational style, I would say that what you have to say has some validity. But if somebody puts a big plate of donuts on that table and tells me I can't have any, I'm going to be getting one of those donuts. If we have a program for those that have cut in line in front of the others that are trying to do it legally, and somehow we grease the skids for them so that they can get through easier, that is going to encourage even more coming over and exacerbate the problem that we've got. The first thing we have to do is secure the border, for crying out loud. We secure the border for other countries. We know how to do it. Secure the border first, and then we can address these problems, and we can be discussing these problems as to what to do. But to say that we're going to do that first, secure the border later, the American public, quite frankly, does not trust the government in Washington, D.C., or I would submit to you any government at this point. They want to see action. They have been told over and over and over platitudes. They want to see action, and they want to see the safety and security for their families, and the only way that's going to happen is with the border secure.
I give you a conversational response.
Debbie, the problem that we have is that you actually, and Lamar Smith and a lot of my other friends, actually do believe that the American public feels that way. Fox News just released a poll last week showing overwhelmingly 66% of Republicans support a pathway to legalization. And much higher than that on a pathway.
Okay, question to both of you, Norman.
Republicans are much higher.
The question about the Norman, a pathway to legalization. Does that mean a pathway to guest worker program, a pathway to amnesty? Which one do you favor?
A pathway to amnesty? I do not support amnesty. I support a pathway to legalization, Paul. Right now, they don't know if they're going to get home tonight to see the kids they're supporting. They're worried about being stopped with a tail light or for any other reason being hauled in and then being ice called and detained at our expense at $70 a day, and we no longer have the breadwinner coming home.
Debbie, do you agree about a pathway to legalization?
I think that a pathway to legalization, not necessarily citizenship, that has been discussed, especially when we're talking about young people and their tuition in college, that has been discussed with having them in the U.S. military. We have people in the U.S. military now that are not U.S. citizens, yet they are dedicated enough to serve in our U.S. military. And I believe that those that are willing to serve in our communities and willing to serve in our military, yes, we can give a pathway, not instant citizenship, but a pathway to that citizenship. But we have got to seriously respect those who have done it right, who stood in line, and not disrespect their patients and their respect of our laws.
Okay, let's get back on the clock. Debbie.
We are on board there.
I agree with you. Already we have some agreement. We've had 3 areas of agreement already. Border security IDs, and now some agreement on who can stay in the country. Now, let's talk about the cost of immigration. What do you think the cost of illegal immigration is?
Well, it's quite high. The Texas Health and Human Services Commission says that the Texas Emergency Medicaid is $62 million. Texas Family Violence Program is $1.3 million. The Texas Health Insurance Program CHIP is about $33 million. That's about $96 million. According to the Texas Health and Human Services Commission report of 2010, the estimated compensated care for undocumented immigrants or illegal aliens totaled $717 million. David Lopez, president of the Harris County Hospital District, said that we spend $130 million on caring for illegal aliens. That was up from $100 million in 2007. Here in Texas, we spend over $13 million a month, about $13.5 million a month, every month of Texas taxpayer dollars for our expense in holding illegal aliens before they're deported. It costs over $50 per person for the 9,000 that we have incarcerated in TDCJ. That does not go into all of the other expenses that we have ancillary to that. The cost is breaking the backs of the people of Texas. We can no longer afford it. Look, we are the most giving, loving people on the face of the earth. Americans are, and Texas is on top of that, especially. But we can no longer take advantage of our taxpayers. And this is why we have to get a handle on this. But the price that we pay is over and above money, because we have people that have been killed. I have a letter here from an elderly couple, a Hispanic couple, that wrote to me. They're not even in my district. They are afraid in their home. They do not leave their home at night, and rarely during the day, out of fear because of the drug cartels and the gang activity that surrounds their home. They're Hispanic, and all of them around them are. And so that is the price that we're paying. That's unfair.
Thank you, Eddie.
That certainly was a weak horn.
All right, you got a one minute rebuttal on that one. Cost of immigration, illegal immigration.
Again, we agree on the criminal element. Do away with them. They wouldn't sit on death row for 10 years if I had my way. Now, you know, what cost of services versus
Norman would
get?
shoot him.
Cost of services, am I supposed to talk?
Yeah, you're supposed to talk. Go
Cost
ahead.
of services. The one big thing that hasn't even been discussed here, we haven't had time to talk about the I-9, but it's how you gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, hire your employees. You complete an I-9, and the law says if the ID looks to be legitimate, the other one's qualified, you hire them. You cannot refuse to hire them. That's discrimination. Now, every time we have a raid, every time ICE comes in, every time we audit our I-9s, what happens? Those employees get run off. They don't leave. They go to employers who cheat the system. They go and be misclassified. And we no longer collect, under that fake Social Security number, we no longer collect taxes, withholding, or provide workman's comp. They go on to the emergency room when they get hurt, and they no longer pay taxes. That's why we have to ID them. Thank you.
Okay, Norman, question for you, because that was exactly what was coming to you. We've got a lot of questions here from a business audience about, why you think business owners should be held accountable, okay?
You can go ahead and ask it. I need to talk longer anyway.
Right, okay. Normally, there's never a limit to that. Okay, so we've got a lot of questions about why are businesses, we have 2 minutes, why should businesses be held accountable? Why are they the first, enforcement mechanism? Why does business has to bear this cost? I mean, there's just constant questions about that.
Look, that was one of my themes as I was up there testifying to my fellow Republicans in our state legislature. Republicans are supposed to stand for free enterprise, lower business taxes, less red tape, help the economic engines that generate our economy and generate new jobs. That's you business owners. Well, what were we doing up there? With these 108 bills, we were going to give you something else to worry about, like the Labor Department, the EEOC, the EPA, the Labor Review Board. Lord, our business owners have too much to put up with now on regulations. The last thing we needed out of our Texas legislature, and thank God they had the good sense not to approve them. The last thing you need is another set of rules for you to run J&L sheet metal by, Ed. Thank you.
You actually have a minute yourself to go.
I don't need it.
Okay. Norman yields the balance of his time to Representative Riddle.
Thank you. As a conservative Republican, I've always felt like smaller government is better and fewer regulations is better. Right now, we could have jobs overnight if the regulations in our oil industry would be lifted. But what I presented was not an onerous regulation. It was something that businesses do now, many of them, not that difficult, not that extensive, that when you hire somebody, check through the E-Verify. If E-Verify is wrong, then that's an offense. It's not that difficult to do. But let me take it a step further, and as a business owner, the number one job of government, if not the only real job of government, the number one job of government is to make sure that the safety and security of the people is well established. That is why we have military. That is why we do what we do. And 70%, over 70% of the illegal aliens that are crossing our border that are not coming from Mexico, they are coming from hostile countries with Al-Qaeda connections, and they're not coming over here to pick peaches, they're coming over here to do us harm. That is why we've got to secure the border.
Debbie, you've already touched on this, and there's a lot of questions coming in, as you can tell. We may have to do this again on KZB radio. We're getting lots of audience participation. Okay, a lot of questions here about, immigration out of Mexico at this point in time, people picking up welfare here in the U.S., a lot of worry about crime, violence, etc. What solutions can you offer on this? And also, what do you think with the recent Wall Street Journal articles that have come out? It looks like apprehensions at the border now at a modern low, let's say about the last 20 years. Has immigration finally subsided due to the economic changes and potentially the birth rate in Mexico dropping to now just 2.0 per family at this point? Your comments?
No, it actually shows that what we are doing on the border, and my hat is off to Colonel McCraw for what he has done with DPS, working together with our soldiers. I sit on appropriations. We appropriated over $200 million to give them the tools that they need. And now is not the time to back off. When something is working, you just don't stop it. And right now, with the Mexican drug cartels and with the violence, and with Houston being the command and control center for the Mexican drug cartels, we're talking about danger. All of these other things are ancillary. That the little girl that was shot, that I told you about, with the fellow that had been deported twice, that's it. That's a sin. That's awful. That could be your daughter, that could be my daughter, that could be any one of us. Our families are not safe and secure as long as our borders are porous, and we're making progress, and shame on President Obama for pulling back the troops. We don't need fewer troops, we need more boots on the ground. We secure the borders of other countries, we need to secure our own. The safety of our families depend on it.
We have absolutely, it's just plain mathematics. Paul mentioned birth rate, you didn't get into it, but it's just plain simple mathematics. Our birth rate, this is something you folks might want to think about this afternoon. You are not having enough children. Our birth rate in this country, black, brown, Asian combined, is less than 2.1, which you have to sustain a society. We're down to about 2.08. Since Roe v. Wade Day, I know you know this, we have aborted 50 million what would have been American-born workers. We have more U.S. citizens retiring from the workforce every year than are entering the workforce. We need these immigrants, and I especially like those from south of the border, because most of them are Catholic heritage, they are pro-life, they are traditional family. I think they're going to make great Republicans.
I disagree with Norman's segment, but this is a nonpartisan operation.
Can I say amen to that, Paul, because he's absolutely right. I'm very pro-life, and we have slaughtered, we have killed 50 million, and you're absolutely right. Our country has been built on immigrants. Our country has been built on those who want to come over and work, who want to come over and assimilate and be part of this nation. My own family immigrated over here from Finland to learn the language, to work hard, and to be an American. And I think that that is what we still need. We need to go in there and we need to revamp our immigration laws so that it will in fact work. So that we can have the people come over that will do the job, that will become Americans, that will be dedicated and loyal to this country. But we need to do it correctly. And we need to stop the flow of those who are coming over
Okay,
here
Debbie,
trying
let's
to hurt and do it incorrectly.
All right, Debbie, let's
and
take
wrong.
it from there. Norman, do you agree with Debbie's last comment?
You know, Paul, this reminds me almost of the debate on whether Houston ought to have zoning. You know, if we had it in the beginning, it might work. The problem with our immigration situation is we haven't done anything for a sensible solution since 1986. And these people are here, whether you like it or not, how they got here. And so that's what we've got to address.
Okay.
We've got to have a...
All right, Norman, let's address it. Okay?
All right, well,
Look, I mean, one of the 800-pound, gorillas in the room is deportation. And I've got a lot of questions up about here about what should ICE do with this, the cost of ICE, estimating the cost in the tens of billions of dollars, which I'm sure it
Want me to
is.
address it, Paul?
You do.
Okay, number one, replace our 1936 Social Security card with one that cannot be counterfeited on my photocopy machine. Number two, demand a criminal background check and positive ID of every non-citizen in this country. And those that are eligible to stay, that some review board decides should stay, then issue them an ID card that can only be used to work for employers who will deduct and match taxes. Cut out this misclassification. That's the three basic things. It will only work, though, based on Debbie's agreement that we have a pathway to legalization. That's not a pathway to citizenship. We're talking about a 10-year probationary period before you'd even be eligible for permanent residence, and it'd be another 5 years, right, Charles Foster, before you could be a citizen. Go ahead.
Debbie.
Well, I think that all of that is quite valid, and I agree with that. I think that we do need to bring common sense in. But the problem that we address with that, when we start fixing here, before we fix the border, then what we do is we encourage more. Let me use this analogy. A few years ago, when the kids were at home and younger, my daughter turned on the bathtub upstairs, and she forgot about it. I didn't know it was on until suddenly water started coming through the ceiling of my kitchen. We had a big mess. Now, we could have thought about, do we use the red towels, the green towels, the purple towels, or the yellow towels to clean up the mess? The fact is, I had to go in and turn the water off, and then we could clean up the mess. Right now, what we're doing is we're arguing whether we use the red towels, the green towels, the purple towels to clean up the mess before we turn off the water. It stops the bleeding, and then we can deal with the others. And I think that these suggestions, many of them, are good, Norman, but we've got to secure the border first.
Okay.
We have to, because of the danger coming across.
Okay. We're still on the clock. Okay. What's that? No, that was it. Question and answer. We're on the clock. Okay. Debbie, you mentioned the towels. People have tried different solutions. The Blanco Act of 1956, Reagan's effective amnesty of 1986. So what's your solution? How would you handle this problem?
Well, first of all, I'm opposed to the amnesty, but I have gone to Israel. My husband and I are strong supporters of Israel. We just got back from our 8th trip. I had been over to Israel before, and the IDF has shown me what they do with their border. In Israel, if they take their border seriously. If they don't take their border seriously, quite frankly, people die. People get blown up. So they use everything. They don't have fences everywhere, but they do have them where they work. They use air assets where it's needed and where it works. They have boots on the ground where it's needed and where it works. Look, we're America, and we have the brain power, and we've got the ability to do what it takes to secure our people. The problem is political correctness. And people fearful of touching this and fearful of coming in. That's why I so admire y'all today and Norm for standing up here and having this conversation, which is most healthy. But there are ways for us to actually secure the border. I asked Colonel McCraw, who the governor appointed over this, I asked him in a committee hearing, is our border secure? His answer was no. And I said, is it possible to secure our border? And he said, yes. And that is what we need to do.
Well, Eddie, all I would ask him is, once we secure that border, what are you gonna do about that 12-horse kicker coming up the Intercoastal Canal? Have any of you seen the fence out in San Diego? A bunch of telephone poles and the surfers are surfing around it. You don't ever completely secure this border. The biggest exposure that your constituents have, Debbie, is not knowing who is here and what cells are going to be activated and when are they going to kill us. That's our problem. We're at war with radical Islam, not the people trying to mow the grass and pour the concrete.
You're absolutely right with that. However, what are we going to do, Norm, when they come across? Are we going to say, are your intentions to come over here and kill us? Are your intentions to come over and mow the lawn? That is why we have a rule of law, because we cannot have it in a way that is so lackadaisical.
Okay, good question,
Rule of
Mark.
law, I am so glad you brought that up there, because rule of law is something that is used well by every talk radio host, and they're not thinking. It's the laws we have that got us in this mess. It's our I-9 laws. I'm sure you will agree with me, Debbie. Roe v. Wade is a lousy law. Slavery was legal. Should we follow it because it was the law? It was legal to kill Jews in Germany because that was the law. We need to revise our immigration laws because they do not work.
Amen. And we need to revise them. But when we revise them, we need to secure the border. Otherwise, the American people do not trust the government to say, okay, we're revising these laws, but the border is still going to remain porous. They're going to think that's a weak argument, and that's weak, and they're not going to put any stock in it.
Debbie, this is the very crux of the whole thing. Secure the border, and then we'll talk about it. God gave us a brain. We can do more than one thing at the same time. We have to work on immigration reform.
But President Reagan had a two-step program, and he made the agreement that he would give the amnesty to the 12 million, but securing the border was the other half of that sandwich. One got done, the other didn't, and for that reason, there's the lack of trust.
Reagan, I love the man, but his plan was a failure. 800,000 out of 3 million signed up. But he didn't change our Social Security card. He didn't create a positive ID. And that's why that candy on the table remains sitting there. And that is why employers who follow the law have been forced to hire illegal immigrants. It's all there. It is a simple solution. If you actually can live with a pathway to legalization, then you and I can work out this border issue.
I think that we can work that out, but you and I have got to do what is necessary. The purpose for government, Norm, the number one purpose for government is to make sure that the safety and security of the people of Texas is well established. As an elected official, I've said over and over that my number one job is to make sure that the safety and security of the people of Texas is well established. If that isn't done and done well, there is no number two priority. Look, practically speaking, I'm a woman. I don't go to a mall where I don't feel like it's safe, where I feel like there's drug running, where I feel like there's cartel, where I feel like that I am not safe. I will choose another mall to go to. You men don't go to a filling station if they're having a lot of robberies there. You go fill your car up somewhere else. There is not one single area, not one of our society that is not negatively affected when we are not safe and secure. And that crime is coming into our backyard. It's coming into our front yard, and it's here. That is why we've got to secure the border. And Norm, I think you and I can figure out the rest.
Okay, now, can you figure it out? We got it. Go ahead.
So, first of all, I know you're not afraid because you are never unarmed. I'm going to tell you something. If you really want to ensure the safety or protect the people of Texas, there's one thing you could do, and you could be a real hero. you could sponsor a bill that eliminates asking people applying for a driver's license if they are here legally. You could follow other states' examples. Utah just did that. Why should we sell cars and trucks to these people and then since 2009 refuse to issue a driver's license so they no longer buy liability insurance from me, and then they're going to run from the scene of an accident?
There's always a hole in everybody's pocket on this issue. Norman, I've got one last question for you. Let's talk about this. Okay, we've got states that have enacted restrictive immigration laws. Arizona, Alabama, etc. Okay, what do you think of them? And what do you think should be done in Texas?
Well, I think that Arizona, Georgia, and Alabama have been the perfect test tube. Praise God, we didn't have to go through it. You business owners and the police chiefs and the sheriffs, you are the people that convinced our Texas legislator, 2/3 majority Republican. You're the people that convinced them by driving up there to testify and sitting for hours and hours, right, Darlene? Anyway, you did it. And that's why, after they backed up and they looked even at the sanctuary city bill, that's why they realized in the end that bill didn't help law enforcement, it hurt it. That bill created 4 unfunded mandates, clear unfunded mandates, more children left behind for the county to take care of, more police officer time on the street, more overtime, more federal funding for training of police officers, and more $70 a day to keep a nonviolent immigrant in jail in our prison system. Those were the reasons that the sanctuary city bill, which was drafted by Bert Solomons, Debbie had a similar bill, they were drafted with good intentions. They were even supported by the majority of the business associations in Texas until they really got to reading and analyzing the bills. And again, my hat is off to our legislators, Republican and Democrat, for having good sense and not putting us into the situation that we're seeing now. Arizona, vacant apartments, empty strip centers. They just recalled Russell Pierce, incidentally, Debbie. He's a Republican senator that filed SB 70. They recalled him. They kicked his tail out of office. In Georgia, you know the story. They're trying to pick the berries and the prisoners walking off. In Alabama, the governor and their Republican attorney general are both wanting to recall their law right now. Thank God Texas dodged the bullet.
Okay,
Let me tell you what we did do. Here in Texas, we had a problem with people coming here from other states, from New York and other states. They were here legally with a visa, but the visa was about to expire. So they could come to Texas with their visa, get a driver's license, and then the driver's license would continue to last, officers, 5 years, about 5 years. And they would appear to be legal even though their visa had expired. We decided we need to fix this, we need to change this. And so we did pass a law that coordinates the expiration of your visa with the expiration of your driver's license. So no longer can someone game the system here in Texas and appear like they're legal with a Texas driver's license. Their expiration of their driver's license will coordinate with the expiration of their visa. We've got to stop the gaming of the system, and we accomplished that and did that, and that is to the benefit of the people of Texas.
And so, refusing to issue a driver's license to people who are going to drive the vehicle to work or to pick up kids or drop them off at school, refusing to issue a driver's license so they can no longer buy liability insurance because you all feel safer. That is not, look, that's like refusing an inoculation to their kids for communicable diseases. The driver's test is to see if the man knows how to drive or woman. The driver's test should not be used as something for federal law. Don't issue one they can travel or get on an airplane with. Issue them a non-citizen driving permit. Thank you.
The driving norm is not a right. Driving is a privilege. Driving is, in fact, a privilege.
Debbie, we're running out of time. With that, let me first off, let's give them a big hand. My position as moderator, I see some agreement here, though. I see some agreement. I see some agreement about more security and about IDs and about the need to, I don't hear anybody saying that we need to deport 12 million people. I hear that there's an agreement about no amnesty on both sides. I hear that there's some solutions that Debbie agreed to about military service veterans going to the head of the line for citizenship.
After they've served in the military 45 years.
I didn't hear anything about the DREAM Act today. Yes, no? On the DREAM
Yeah,
Act?
sure, I'll tell you.
Yes?
Yeah, I wanted to dive into
So
that.
we've got at least 6 points of
You
agreement
want
here.
to go first? Who are you?
Well, Norman, I was getting to that. I don't know, Pastor White, is he like this on Sunday sermon? He just interrupts you? I don't know. All right, and with that, let's go to closing statements, 2 minutes each. Norman, you're up first.
Okay, well, DREAM Act, just very quickly, I'll tell you what, I put 2 kids through the University of Texas, RTF degree for Tracy, a law degree for Andy, and my kids attended at in-state tuition, and I didn't feel like I'd gotten anything free. I'm gonna tell you right now, in-state tuition, I don't think that's any big deal. And those people, incidentally, that they gave it to the bill, they've been paying sales taxes and property taxes for at least 3 years. Closing statement, look, again, I'm gonna tell you right now, folks, there are not many elected Republicans that I know of that would have been willing to come here today and do this. And I understand, and I hope all of you understand, I don't have a vote in the legislature, and Debbie Riddle does. And so, I mean, my mission, I'm gonna tell you, people will have, there may be somebody in here that agrees that from time to time I am loud and I am obnoxious. There may be a few that disagree. But I'll
Okay,
tell you one
Governor
thing-
Perry did that
I'll tell you
about
one
a year
thing that
ago.
everybody agrees on, Paul. When I make up my mind on something, I am persistent. And the one thing that I am going to make, that's going to be my mission, is I am going to win Debbie Riddle over on this issue. And I'm going to do it. And I'm going to start right now.
Oh, the Yellow Rose of Texas. Mr. Norman,
He did this to me in Austin. He came up to testify against one of my bills, and before he did it, he presented me yellow roses. And I guess nobody there on the dais could focus on what we were saying. They'd never seen anything like it. And he hugged me and kissed me, and I hugged him right back. And I got to tell you, Norman, you know, you and I do work together, and I do listen. But you know what? I'm going to be winning you over to some of my side as well, because I have written a book. And the title of my book is Taking Back Your Country, Your Community, and Your Kids. And this is a way to truly have your voice heard in the legislature, statewide, nationwide, and become an activist. And this is a how-to. Now, he doesn't really need it because he already knows how to do that. But Norman, let me present you with this book. It has a whole chapter in it on political correctness, and I want to give you the award for being the most politically incorrect person I know.
this is a great debate because you saw a lot of solutions that both Debbie and Norm agreed to. You see areas that they're still working on each other for a final solution. America will have a final solution one day on immigration, one way or the other. And it's through debates like this that we'll actually get there. I want to tell you that as a talk show host, I'm unafraid to show up in the lion's den because I have a lot of elected officials call me and say, Paul, Debbie and Norman get together, this has got to be a nuclear explosion. But once again, we proved that if the Heights Chamber of Commerce calls, good people will come and listen, and I want to thank you all for doing that today. And let's give Norman Adams and Debbie a big hand.